Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be joining us from today. My name is Francesco Del Carpio, and I am the CFAL York Operations Coordinator. I would like to officially open the sixth session of our VR/XR Training and Education Knowledge and Experience Sharing Speaker Series, which is being presented in collaboration with the DexR Lab at York University. And I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territory upon which our campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. The area is known as Takaranto and has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that the territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is an online event, our participants may be joining from various locations, so I strongly encourage you to learn about the traditional land upon which you are located. With this, I welcome our moderator, our speakers, and our participants from around the world. Welcome to our webinar. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Ahmad Mohammadi. Dr. Ahmad Mohammadi is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Civil Engineering at York University, Toronto, Ontario, where he received his PhD in transportation engineering. His research focuses on applications of virtual reality in transportation safety, traffic conflict analysis, and traffic microsimulation modeling. His research contributes to improving transportation safety and efficiency. Ahmad is also the coordinator of Disaster and Emergency Extended Virtual Reality Lab, or the DexR Lab at York University. Dr. Ahmad, thank you very much for moderating today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Welcome back, everyone, to another VR XR-based training education speaker series. My name is Ahmed, and I will moderate today's sessions. I'm so excited to moderate the discussion today because we have fantastic experts who can share their experiences about making virtual reality a reality in chemistry and biochemistry classrooms. So about the session, we have around 30 to 40 minutes presentation, which is the main presentation. And then afterward, we will hold a question and answer session. So you can write down your questions during the presentation in the chat. And then we will ask the questions to the experts after the main presentation. Now it's time to introduce the speakers. So the first expert today is Dr. Derek Jackson, who is an associate professor at York University. He has well-established scholarship of teaching and learning expertise in chemistry, education, who have published several papers in Journal of Chemical Education. He has established track record of introducing cutting-edge technology to undergrad teaching labs at York University. His impactful educational initiatives were recognized by the Faculty of Science Excellence in Teaching Award in 2019. And then since 2021, he has collaborated with Dr. Kyle, in a long-term initiative to bring VR-based learning to the Department of Chemistry at York University. Our another speaker today is Dr. Kyle Belozerov, who is a Sessional Associate Professor in the same Department of Chemistry at York University. Dr. Kyle has over 10 years of experience teaching chemistry and biochemistry and molecular biology courses at York University. He is an active and regular participant and presenter at a variety of educational seminars, workshops, conferences, both at York and elsewhere. He is also a past recipient of Faculty of Science Excellence in Teaching Award in 2021. He became an expert in VR-based visualization of macromolecular structures and received institutional funding at York University to implement a VR pilot project in a third-year biochemistry course. So without further ado, it's time to pass the discussion over the speakers. So Dr. Drake, please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and hello to everyone in attendance. Greetings from the Faculty of Science. Thanks to Lassonde for hosting us today. So as mentioned, I am Derek Jackson, and myself and Dr. Belozerov are co-principal investigators on this VR initiative that we've started in our department in the Faculty of Science. For this presentation, I will be doing sort of most of the presenting here. However, Dr. Belozerov may be adding some points here and there, and also will probably be able to help me answer some of your questions at the end. So we do encourage you to ask questions. If there's anything that we talk about that you'd like some clarification on, we'd be happy to address them afterwards. So as mentioned, we are here to present to you our efforts in making virtual reality a reality in some of our chemistry and biochemistry courses right here at York. And feel free to follow Dr. Belozerov on Twitter at IDoGenomics if you want to do so. Okay, so let's start off this presentation by discussing why VR. So why did we first come up with the idea to introduce virtual reality into our courses here at York? So there are some problems in terms of student learning as it relates to, well, we started off with biochemistry, but you could apply this to organic chemistry and other areas of chemistry as well. And these are well documented in the peer-reviewed literature. So we're talking about challenges in visualizing structure-function relationships in macromolecules. So we're talking about large molecules such as proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, and so forth. And these challenges in visualizing these large molecules and relating their three-dimensional structure to their function are well documented. And there's just one example down here at the bottom of the slide. This is a skill called 3D literacy. And this is a skill that can be very difficult for students to obtain throughout their undergraduate years, particularly well-documented in a well-documented fashion when using traditional teaching methods. So for example, in the left-hand corner of the slide here, what we see here is the type of figure that you would see in a traditional two-dimensional textbook. So what we're seeing here on the left-hand side is essentially a sequence of a few amino acids bonded together in a protein. And this figure is trying to teach the concept of dihedral angles within that protein. It's not necessary to understand sort of the nuances of the biochemistry here, but just to appreciate the fact that this is a three-dimensional concept, being able to think about how these bonds rotate and how it affects the structure of this molecule. And when you have a static, non-interactive figure, such as this one from a textbook right here, it is certainly very difficult for students, myself included, when I first learned this, to be able to visualize these three-dimensional shapes and how they relate to these particular angles. So over the years, there has been some improvements in visualizing these types of structures. And so what we're seeing here on the right is one of many different software programs that you can use to visualize three-dimensional molecules. So for example, JMOL is one of them. There's countless others, some of which you may be familiar with and may have used. And certainly this helps. It certainly helps to see the structures in this fashion. You can rotate them, zoom in, out, and so forth. It's still not immersive, however, and it's not really three-dimensional. I mean, you do have the ability to rotate in 3 dimensions, but you're still looking at it on a 2-dimensional screen, and so it's still classified as being non-immersive. So this is sort of what we're aiming towards right now, is the idea of using virtual reality and MR, which is mixed reality, to offer an engaging, flexible, and immersive learning experience. So using virtual reality headsets, we have the opportunity now to give students the chance to visualize large, complex molecules immersively in 3 dimensions with many degrees of freedom, to manipulate these structures and to study their structure and learn more about their function. What you're seeing here, by the way, on the right-hand side is an actual sort of screenshot, if you will, that I took with one of my headsets. And it shows Dr. Belozerov and one of our students and two virtual avatars that have joined us, looking in mixed reality at the structure of a three-dimensional protein, as you can see right here. And throughout this presentation, I'll be showing you multiple screenshots as well as some videos. And of course, please keep in mind that these are all sort of flattened images and videos of an immersive three-dimensional experience. Those of you who are attending who have used a virtual reality headset before will sort of understand what I'm getting at, and that you really have to put on the headset to get the full immersive experience out of it. So why now? Why is it that, this year, or I guess we started 2 years ago, that this project came about? So virtual reality certainly offers a tremendous potential to improve 3D literacy in chemistry and biochemistry. But only very recently has the cost of the hardware come down low enough to make use for education feasible. So there are many universities around the globe that have started to use VR for chemical research. And you can see here, of course, many recognizable institutions here, but very few have incorporated VR into teaching chemistry. And these are just a couple of references to other institutions that are just starting to use virtual reality for chemistry and biochemistry instruction. So we're really kind of at the cutting edge, or the very start of this field of using virtual reality in this method. So our project represents the first use of VR as a teaching tool in the Faculty of Science at York, and probably one of the first in Canada in terms of chemistry and biochemistry for education. So there are a couple other groups that are starting to use this as well. There's a couple in the United States and I think one in Australia. But again, we're one of the first to bring VR into chemistry and biochemistry classrooms. And the purpose of this presentation is to take you through how we've been able to do this, what we've learned, and some tips and tricks if you want to introduce VR into your own classrooms. So we were fortunate to get a tremendous amount of support, both internally and externally. In particular, the two of us were very pleased to be awarded with an Academic Innovation Fund, AIF grant, just over the last year. We are sort of associating our grant with strategic goals 4 and 10, quality education and reduced inequalities. The main objectives for this project were to purchase the necessary VR hardware and accessories in order to bring VR to our chemistry and biochemistry classes, to develop teaching materials that could be used in multiple courses across our department, and to pilot the integration of the materials into chemistry and biochemistry courses with the cooperation and support of our course directors, as well as the York University Library, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Before this grant was realized, we were able to obtain a very small number of headsets for a small-scale pilot project, but the majority of today's presentation will be on the work that we've done just over the past year to really scale up this project and bring VR to many more students in our departments. So we had to decide early on what hardware we were going to use for virtual reality. And those of you that are watching are probably already familiar with several of the different models that are available out there for purchase. We decided fairly early on to go with the Meta Quest 2, formerly known as the Oculus Quest 2, for our purpose. And there were many reasons for choosing this particular system. It is a standalone system that does not require a connection to a computer, which means that it is very portable, and we can bring it to pretty much any classroom on campus that we want. It has pretty high quality visuals. It looks very good. The refresh rate is very high, and generally speaking, most students report no issues with discomfort upon using it. It's available for a very accessible price. The prices have fluctuated over the past couple of years, but recently it came down in price quite significantly. And so obviously for us to purchase many of these headsets, and we actually have quite a lot of them. We have over 60 right now, and we're going to be purchasing even more. Of course, it's important that we make sure that the price is accessible for our needs. And in addition to that, the headsets can be equipped with removable silicone guards over the front. So the front here is basically, it's foam, but you can easily obtain for a low price silicone covers that go over them that can be cleaned, because many different students are using the headsets, and this allows us to maintain sanitation when using them. So the vast majority of our virtual reality fleet is composed of the MetaQuest 2 headsets. And of course, it has 2 controllers that are used for the students to manipulate their VR environments. We have also purchased a small number of MetaQuest Pro headsets. Now, these headsets are higher end at a much higher price point compared to the MetaQuest 2. The Quest Pro is much more comfortable to wear and certainly can be used, for example, by students who have large glasses or for whatever reason cannot wear the MetaQuest 2. So the Quest Pro is certainly a minor component of our fleet, but we do have a few of them. And mainly they're used by instructors or teaching assistants, but can be used by students in particular situations. But again, this is a much higher price point. And we were just discussing with the moderator beforehand, the MetaQuest 3 is going to be released hopefully this fall. And so we're excited to see how well it works out for us as well. So the MetaQuest 2 is the headset that the vast majority of our students are using for the reasons that I outlined. So when you're working on a budget, when you're part of a university, you have to be creative about your solutions on how to manage such a large fleet of headsets. And so you can see here on the left, we have what we call the mobile transportation unit, which is, well, a cart from IKEA, which allows us to move around our headsets. We actually have a few of them right now. Each cart can hold 12 headsets, and you can see that we have to keep them charged. And on the right-hand side, we have to keep all the controllers together. We have to keep the controllers paired and labeled. So we've developed what we call the multi-arm controller apparatus, which is a drawing rack from IKEA. But again, these are solutions that, working sort of on a budget, we have to be creative about how we transport and take care of our headsets. So these are things that if you are someday going to be managing your own fleet, these are some things that you need to consider about how you're going to maintain your fleet of headsets. So once we decided on the hardware for the system that we chose, the next step was to decide on what software we were going to use. So for molecular visualization, early on in our project, we considered several options, but we very quickly narrowed in on Nanome. So this is the company right here, Nanome. This is the program that we chose for our VR project that the students will be using. So I do not work for Nanome, although many people who talk to me about the program swear that I must be some kind of employee because I just say glowing things about them. I'm not exaggerating when I say that Nanome is one of the most impressive pieces of software that I have ever used. Nanome is produced by a small company of the same name in San Diego, California. And they have come up with a program that can be used on pretty much any VR headset out there, not just the MetaQuest 2. And it is a molecular visualization software where any 3D chemical structure can be imported, so a variety of file types are accepted. Nanome allows for live collaboration or instruction between multiple users where many different people can meet virtually in the same room. All you need is an internet connection, so it allows for remote work. And you will see examples of this later on in the presentation of how this collaboration works. Nanome has a very cool feature called spatial recordings that allows people using the program to create recordings in virtual reality. For example, manipulating or showing off a molecule and narrating and talking about it, that other people who have the recording file can load and watch the recording in the room. And it can actually be interactive as well. You will see examples of this in a little bit. Nanome also has a built-in internet browser, and this allows students, for example, to access their learning management system. So of course, here at York, we have eClass. Students can log into eClass from their Nanome rooms and, for example, take a quiz or answer questions related to the molecule that they're looking at. They can do this right in virtual reality without the need to take off the headset, to have a computer handy, and so forth. The options for manipulating the structures in terms of how the structure looks, measuring angles, bond lengths, and so forth is extremely extensive. And so if I had more time, I would be happy to talk about all the cool things that this program can do. But suffice it to say for now, it can do pretty much anything with a chemical structure in 3 dimensions. And it is very simple and easy to start using. but to unlock its full potential, you need to play around with it for a bit. But fortunately for students, the basic features are very easy to get started with. Nanome is free to obtain, at least for the basic features that we need. And there is a paid license for the more advanced features. And I can answer any questions you have about that later if you wish. So once we decided on the hardware and the software, the next step was to figure out what courses might be amenable to virtual reality. So to date, we have successfully incorporated virtual reality components into 2 courses in our department. The one that I'll be spending most of my time talking about is Chem 3051. This is a 3rd-year course that is taken by our biochemistry students and some of our chemistry students, as well as quite a lot of students in the Department of Biology. The course is called Macromolecules of Biochemical Interest, and it's a course that goes into the detailed structure and function relationships of proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. So it's the perfect course to use for VR. We've also successfully integrated VR into a 1st-year course, and it's a small 1st-year course, Chem 1500. This is a high school bridging course that we offer to students who lack high school chemistry or maybe didn't do very well in high school chemistry. And we used VR in this course basically to just show them some simple molecules and get them used to the idea of simple like Vesper geometries, tetrahedral, trigonal, planar, and so forth. But I will be spending most of the time talking about Chem 3051. We have plans to introduce VR into the following courses in our department. We have a course called Drug Discovery and Development, Chem 3075. Chem 3020 is Organic Chemistry at the intermediate level, and Chem 3050 is Advanced Biochemistry. Chem 4055 in red here is a brand new course that has received departmental and faculty approval, so it's going through the governance process. This is a course that Dr. Belozerov has developed to use VR extensively to study enzyme design, and we're really excited in the department to start offering that course in fall 2024. Now, what we see here on the right are just some pictures that we took of students using VR in our classes. And so we can see here in the upper right-hand corner, this is Chem 1500, students using VR to look at molecules. And the lower right, this was taken during our pilot project in Chem 3051. These are students in 3rd year macromolecules exploring their structures in virtual reality in one of our classrooms. So how did we incorporate virtual reality into our courses? So again, I'm going to be talking mostly about Chem 3051 here, which is our 3rd year course. And we, in collaboration with the course director, Professor Philip Johnson, we developed 2 components to the course evaluation scheme that utilize virtual reality. The first component is interactive self-paced VR tutorials throughout the semester. I'll talk more about these in a few minutes, but essentially these are mini lessons or modules that we prepared ahead of time that students would work on at their own pace and answer some low stakes quiz questions on a variety of different topics relating to macromolecules. And this is worth 15% of the total course grade. And then the second major component of VR was a group project, which we call the capstone, where students work in small groups to create their own virtual reality presentations on a macromolecule of their choice. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And that was worth 10% of the course grade. To give you a little bit more information about this Chem 3051 course that we offer, the enrollment is typically about 120 students, so a medium-sized course as far as our faculty is considered. And mostly the course consists of chemistry, biochemistry, and biology students. So we do have people from biology joining us, as well as our own chemistry and biochemistry majors. As mentioned before, this course is a detailed survey of the chemistry of carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids, as well as lipids. And we are very thankful to Professor Johnson for letting us introduce VR into the course and being so flexible with us. So let's talk a little bit more now about those VR activities and how we were able to implement them in Chem 3051. So the first course component that I'll be talking about are these interactive self-paced VR tutorials. So Dr. Belozerov and I created 3 interactive tutorials in virtual reality using Nanome. One on carbohydrates, one on proteins, and one on nucleic acids. So we created these modules in virtual reality, and we developed a series of low-stakes quiz questions associated with each of them. This component of the course would not have been possible without the kind assistance and collaboration of the Digital Media Lab, the Media Creation Lab, I should say, at the Scott Library here at York. They were kind enough to basically host a fleet of our headsets, and students were able to book time at the library to go to the library and use a headset and basically go through these VR tutorials throughout the semester. So mostly self-paced. We did have generous due dates by which these needed to be completed, but overall the students were given a lot of flexibility on when they completed these activities. As mentioned, each tutorial was accompanied by a set of quiz questions and, pardon me. And these quiz questions were all completed through eClass or Moodle, through the learning management system in virtual reality. So prior to the students doing the self-paced tutorials, we did have a brief 1-hour orientation to the VR headsets that the students could attend. We offered very flexible timings, and we had a couple of senior TAs available to help us. But from that point onwards, the students were encouraged to explore this on their own, given how straightforward the software is to use. And of course, because of the flexible timing, they didn't have to worry about pressure to complete it within a certain amount of time. And so as far as the student experience goes, we wanted to make it as low stress as possible. So what I'm going to show you now on the next slide is a short video clip that we recorded in VR, showing you what one of these tutorials looks like. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the student experience. So here's a brief video clip of sort of what the students would be seeing in virtual reality. And this particular lesson is on a biochemistry topic called the Ramachandran plot. And it's okay if you're watching this and you haven't heard of this topic before, but this is a particular topic that is very difficult for students to visualize sort of two-dimensionally, and that's why we chose it as one of our modules. So I'll just play a little bit of this for you.
Here, this is the
and hopefully you can hear the audio.
psi angle right here. And I have set it to 0, and we're not going to touch that throughout the rest of this demonstration. What we will be doing instead, I'll just delete that here, is we're going to be manipulating the phi angle. And according to the diagram and what was mentioned earlier, we're going to select the 4 atoms, starting with the carboxyl carbon of the previous residue, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see here that it's essentially 180 degrees. And so if we go back to this Ramachandran plot, we're basically starting, exactly where Kyle is shining the laser, a phi angle of 180 degrees and a psi angle of 0. And what I'm going to be doing, as Kyle narrates and comments, is I'm going to be rotating around this bond right here. So this nitrogen-carbon bond, where this green circle is. And I'm going to rotate it clockwise from this direction. And we're essentially going to travel from right to left across the Ramachandran plot. And Kyle will be able to narrate and give you a sense of.
So again, what we're seeing in this clip here is a nanome room. So this is a virtual space within the program. We see here in the video that there's a small chemical structure that we created. And of course, Nanome allows you to color code it, label it however you wish. And what you're also seeing here are virtual avatars. So this is my virtual avatar and I'm narrating. And Dr. Belozerov is just off sort of the screen here. But I mean, obviously, if you're in VR, you can just turn your body and you will see him. And the two of us are co-presenting using this molecule as an example. Nanome allows you to import slides, PDFs, images. And so we created some figures to help augment the lesson. And one of the things that is not sort of appreciated in this clip is that these tutorial modules that we created, these recordings are interactive. So at any time during this lesson, students can pause this recording and activate what's called interact mode. And they can grab this structure and manipulate it themselves however they wish. So they can take measurements, they can turn it around, they can look at it from a different angle. They have complete freedom to play around with the molecule as much or as little as they want, or scroll through the slides, for example. They can do this if they're trying to answer a quiz question and maybe they need to rotate the structure a bit or look at it from a different angle. They have the complete freedom and flexibility to do this. And once the students are ready to continue with the lesson, they just hit play and it just snaps right back to where it was in order to resume the recording. So this is an extremely powerful feature of this program, and we have leveraged this potential sort of to the fullest in creating an interactive experience for our students. So this particular lesson would be associated with a few quiz questions. And again, the students in this virtual reality room would just, click on a few buttons, bring up a web browser in VR, go to eClass, load up the quiz, and the quiz would say, something like at 10 minutes into the video, we told you to watch out for this. What type of structure is this? A, B, C, D. Students will answer it. And, of course, it'll be graded just as it would any other eClass module. So this is just an example of the type of experience that the students can have within Nano using our modules.
Here,
So here's another example here that's related to the similar concept. So this is an example of something that we actually ask the students to do. So in the actual tutorial itself, we sort of train students on how to use what's called the measuring tool to measure angles within a protein. And so this is just a very quick video clip showing you that within Nano, students can, activate what's called the measuring tool in their right hand. They can click on atoms within this molecule, and they get an angle measurement, and then they can write that down. For example, they could use like a Google Docs or a piece of paper, however they want. And the students need to measure these angles in order to learn more about the shape of this part of the molecule. You see it has a helical shape, and the angles that you get here are basically exactly what you would predict given this protein secondary structure. So we have the students can basically perform some of these measurements, and then we have the students produce their own what's called a Ramachandran plot. Again, it's not important if you don't, have a background in biochemistry, but suffice it to say, what the students are doing is essentially reproducing figures that you find in every biochemistry textbook. So every biochemistry textbook will have a figure like this, but students often have trouble figuring out, well, what exactly are these points representing? Where do they come from? Why are they showing up where they do on this plot? So by getting the students to make the measurements themselves, they can build the plot, and it suddenly becomes much more obvious why certain points are where they are, why these points are all clustered here in blue, why the points are clustered up here in orange, for example. So they learn by doing. They learn by actually doing the work on a three-dimensional model immersively, and then making their own plot at home, which we've received a lot of good feedback on. I'll show you some of that later. In fact, I'll show it to you right now. So here is just some student feedback. We ran a survey with ethics approval, and this is a sample of student feedback relating to protein dihedral angles. And we used a Likert scale here, and you can see that in blue, my conceptual understanding of phi inside dihedral angles was enhanced by this VR exercise. Overwhelmingly agree. So this is a topic that is well known in the literature, that students struggle with 3D literacy. And as I mentioned before, when I first learned this back when I was an undergraduate, I really struggled, and once I started seeing it in virtual reality, it just suddenly became a matter of, well, of course, this is very intuitive now, once I actually saw it. So we got really good feedback on that. We also got really good feedback on alpha helices and beta sheets. Again, these are just, different structural elements of the protein. And you can see that, again, this is just something else that students have struggled with previously, well documented, overwhelmingly agree, and nobody disagreed with this particular one. So we're very happy to see that. That's exactly what we wanted to see. The second component to the Chem 3051 course that we'd like to share with you is our group project, which we also call the capstone. And students in this course formed groups of 4 students, and they chose a macromolecule, usually a protein or an enzyme. Well, most enzymes are proteins, but usually a protein from the Molecule of the Month database, from the Royal Crystallography Society database. So we gave them a link to that. And this is a website that basically has a large collection of macromolecules available for download, so structures and educational information. And so what the students had to do on their own time was, in their group, basically get together, put on 4 headsets, and bring up the molecule and do an interactive presentation on that particular molecule. So show off various structural elements of the molecule. What kind of secondary structures do they see? If it's an enzyme, where is the active site? How does the substrate bind, and so forth? We gave the students a lot of flexibility. We gave them a rubric, but we also gave them a lot of flexibility, and we strongly encouraged them to just be creative. Use the tools within Nanome, play around with the settings, play around with the tools, and try to come up with something that is unique, original, and something that they can be proud of. And we were really pleased with the presentations that we got. Each group also submitted a short research paper, not very long, I think it was just a couple of pages, but most of their marks came from a 10-minute VR recording presenting their molecules. So we were looking for about 10 minutes for their recordings. So they got together, and again, with the help of the library, they booked time as a group. They did their presentations, and then we downloaded the files from the headset and watched them on our own headsets later on. So this video here is a group. So these are students in the course that did a fantastic presentation on a molecule called hexokinase. And again, it's not necessary for you and those of you who are watching to understand what this enzyme does, but we were really impressed with how this group divided up the tasks and presented together, and how they showed off the molecules. So I'll just play for you this clip of the students doing their project.
So I'm just going to come into this molecule over here. And as you can see, this is the glucose molecule we have over here. And you can maybe take a closer look. And as you can see, this is glucose, carbon 6 and the glucose with the oxygen making a hydrogen bond with the aspartate 211. So we've shown that with the measurement tool. And as you can see, this glucose ring, it makes additional bonds that I discussed before with the glutamate 269, the asparagine 237, and the glutamate over here, glutamate 302. As you can see now in the mechanism displayed earlier, the ATP molecule, the gamma phosphate, which is this one, the phosphates are in orange, it will move over to this glucose and bind to it through the mechanism displayed earlier. But as you can see, the active site in this close-up structure.
So this was a fantastic presentation, and to give you an example of the creativity, these students actually brought in one of the substrates for this enzyme that was not part of this crystal structure, and actually dragged it in and showed where it would bind within the molecules. So they sort of explored the functions of the program more so than maybe some of the other groups did, which was really, really nice to see, when senior students sort of go a bit above and beyond. So just as a reminder that all these structures that you're seeing here that they're using are three-dimensional, or they're actual crystal structures that were determined experimentally. And again, these are freely accessible on the web. And the program is actually integrated with the crystal database as well. And you can also look at small molecules too. So the possibilities are almost limitless for this piece of software. It's really fantastic.
So I'm just going to...
So just here's some more feedback that we got from our survey. Overall, we found that VR labs were feasible to implement in medium-sized courses at York in our faculty and department, and were well received by the students. We can see here on the left that overall, the vast majority of the respondents reported good or excellent experience with virtual reality throughout the semester. So that's absolutely fantastic to see. And over here on the right-hand side, we were very pleased to see that the students overwhelmingly felt that the VR exercises helped them develop a better understanding of macromolecular structure. And that really was the point for starting this whole project. If we go back, or if we think back to one of the first slides that I showed you, again, it's this whole concept of 3D literacy for macromolecules that students really do struggle with this. And it's not just anecdotal. We have the literature precedent for this. And so we're really happy when students walk out of our sort of virtual reality experiences and they say, well, now it makes sense. Like now, I saw it presented in lecture, but now when I see it in 3 dimensions right in front of me, and I can see how this bond, when I rotate it, how it affects this part of the structure down here, it now makes sense. And that is very good to see. We are very happy with the results that we've got. Again, these are just some of our survey results, but we have more as well that tell us the same thing. So what did we learn? Well, first point here is that it takes time, more than one session, for students to become comfortable with the VR environment. So we do have a large group of students who are using VR, and that number increases year after year. And there is quite a variance in terms of comfort level. whereby some students, when they start off with virtual reality, they just dive right into it and they just pick up the controllers and they are just completely fluent and comfortable immediately. And there are other students who need more time to become comfortable with the setup, but eventually they get there. So what we found is that continuous exposure to VR throughout the semester helps students become more familiar and comfortable with the headsets and the software. So we determined early on that it would be far better to expose students to VR in a longitudinal fashion. So a little bit now, a little bit later still, and so forth throughout the term, rather than trying to have like one day of VR where we do all the VR together and that's it. So that certainly would be too overwhelming and it wouldn't give the students enough time to sort of become familiar with the technology. So that is very important, that if you're introducing VR into your own courses, to consider that students do need time to become comfortable and that a certain amount of flexibility is needed. We found that students enjoyed a mixture of instructor-led discussions as well as individual and small group student activities. And these were both well received. So like in our pilot project, we actually had live instructor-led discussions. Last year, we had mostly self-paced lessons, and these were all very well received. And the students also really enjoyed the group work. And in VR, less is more. It is quite easy to underestimate the amount of time students will need to complete a learning task. And again, it just comes down to the fact that for the vast majority of our students in the Faculty of Science, well over 90% reported that this was their very first experience with any kind of virtual reality. And so because of that, it is necessary that, we have flexibility, patience in the process, and try to give the students to conduct the activities at their own pace as much as possible, rather than giving them very strict time limits on everything. And so the students, I think, really appreciated the flexibility that we offered them with this particular project. So this pretty much, we're just basically wrapping up now the sort of the formal part of the presentation. Not sure how we did on time, but I would like to thank, pretty much all our funding sources. So the Academic Innovation Fund, the AIF at York University, for providing funding for purchasing headsets. Dr. Belozerov and I were very pleased and fortunate to be awarded an eCampus Ontario VLS2 grant, which gave us additional funding that we needed to record some content. So we've recorded a lot of interactive modules on a variety of topics in biochemistry and organic chemistry, which are now available for anyone to use under a Creative Commons license. We had some wonderful collaborators that helped us develop these modules. In particular, sorry about that. In particular, pardon me, I would like to thank Abigail Clapperton at the University of Toronto, Professor Helen Tran at the University of Toronto, and Dr. Vivian Luke at the University of Toronto Mississauga campus for being fantastic collaborators. We were also assisted by undergraduate students, senior students, Casey and Kevin, and they helped us in the early days with sort of beta testing our modules, giving feedback, providing learning materials, and so forth. And we're thankful to them as well. And so I'd like to thank you for joining us today and listening to our presentation. I hope we've been able to give you a sense of how we were able to introduce VR into several of our courses here in the department. It's been quite a journey over the last couple of years, but it's been very rewarding and satisfying to see it develop to the extent that it has. And we're also looking forward to continuing this work with more courses in the future. Thanks for your attention. We'd be very happy to answer any questions, technical or pedagogical, that you may have on this. I'm sure Dr. Belozerov will be able to help out with that as well. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Derek, for a great presentation. I learned so much during this presentation. Yeah, so let's go for the question. The first question is, great presentation and great to see students really enjoying their use with VR in their studies. Just curious to know about the data results from the Likert scales with neutral for use with VR in classroom. Do you have any qualitative post feedback from students as well? And also, how do exams or evaluations going on? Are they also in VR since the content is displayed that way? Yes, these are two questions.
Kyle, did you want to take that since I've been doing most of the talking, or would you like me to take it?
Certainly. Yeah, I will be happy to answer this question. So we have conducted a pretty extensive survey that was approved by York's ethics office after one of these sessions where we used VR in the classroom. And, we have probably about 15 to 20 different questions that we asked. This is right now being prepared for publication, so we have not shown you, all of these questions and all of that student feedback. We just showed you maybe like one or two examples of that. But what we learned is that the feedback is overwhelmingly extremely positive. Okay, so the students like the technology, they like learning macromolecular structure in VR. And we do also have some preliminary evidence to suggest that this type of learning environment actually helps students retain these concepts long term. So again, we don't have the data to show you because this is still being analyzed and processed, but we do have some preliminary indication that this is a very successful strategy for teaching chemistry, especially chemistry of these large complex molecules. So the second question that you asked was, how do exams evaluations go? Are they also in VR? Yeah, so we ask students to answer short quizzes in VR, because as Dr. Jackson mentioned, when a student is watching the interactive recording in Nanome, they can actually open a web browser, perfectly functional, web browser, and they can log on to eClass. So once they're in eClass, they can start a quiz, right? So it can be a multiple choice quiz, or it can be a short answer quiz. It can be timed, not timed, the options are all there. And what we used is just a simple multiple choice quiz that the students can answer while manipulating the structure and doing some kind of activity that we prepared them for in the recording. So this is the method or methodology that we used so far. We have not done, extensive, 3-hour exams in virtual reality because we just don't see the need for this. But we did use these active learning exercises where the students would watch something, then perform some kind of a procedure that they just learned and answer the quiz question immediately right after, all in virtual reality. So that's what we did so far.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a couple of questions. So one question is, so you said during the presentation you have mixed reality and also VR, right? Virtual reality. So which one are you using currently during these courses? Are you using both or mainly VR?
Yeah, so we're mainly using VR, and the reason for it is just simply technical. So as Dr. Jackson said, the majority of our collection is composed of Oculus, or pardon me, Meta Quest 2 devices that really do not allow any mixed reality applications, because the cameras are infrared and not, regular light-based cameras. So mixed reality can only be implemented so far with what we have using Meta Quest Pro. But because we only have a few of those, we do not, get students to engage in mixed reality, only virtual reality with those Quest 2 devices. In the future, as probably many attendees know, in the future, Quest 3 device is supposed to deliver mixed reality experiences that are comparable in quality, or possibly even a little bit better than Quest 2 currently does. The Quest 3 device will come out, I think, in mid-October. So we obviously haven't experimented with it, but hopefully that will open a wider door to introducing mixed reality exercises in the classroom as well. But so far, we only have done virtual reality.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
And this screenshot here, this is from a MetaQuest Pro, which has the color pass-through cameras. But as Kyle mentioned, the Quest 2s have infrared, and it doesn't look very good with mixed reality, so we don't use it that way.
Okay, so nice. So one question is, how many sessions, how many portion of, you said, for example, 10% for the grade or the course capstone project, right? But in terms of the hours, how many sessions from total sessions of a course you assign to the VR? What I mean is, how many hours students during one semester is dealing with learning inside the VR right now?
Yeah, I can try to answer that also, and maybe Dr. Jackson will add anything that I would have forgotten. So the way that we have set up this VR component in this third-year course is that the students can book a time at Scott Library, go to their facility, and perform exercises using the headsets that are located at that facility. Now, there is no limit on the number of slots, time slots, or bookings that the student can make throughout the semester, right? So in our estimation, all of the VR work can probably be completed by an average student within maybe 10 to 15 hours, okay, during the whole semester. So I don't know, approximately maybe 1 hour per week during the course of the semester. However, because there is no limit on the number of bookings a student can make, some students we noticed, like to book more frequently than others, right? Some students we observed booked, time slots of 3 hours per week. And that's just up to each individual student. If they feel that they need a little bit more time to learn the concepts a little bit slower, it's their choice, right? If the student feels that they're confident about what they're learning, then they can breeze through a 1 hour exercise in, half an hour. So this kind of built-in flexibility we found is very useful for the students, because there is variation certainly in the level of comfort that the students experience with the technology and this way of learning.
And
yeah.
I was just going to add on to that, especially when it came to the capstone project, the students were only expected to do a 10-minute recording. And of course, we understand that students want to do rehearsals, or maybe there's like a really bad take and they need to do it again, for example. I think we were predicting like they would really only need to get together for an hour, and they might need to do it a couple times, but eventually they would get a 10-minute recording out of it. We made it clear to the students that, if there were just some minor little hiccups or whatever, that's absolutely fine, because, we don't want students to sort of go too overboard on this. We did find that I think some students were just very self-critical, and they wanted it to be absolutely perfect. And so they booked a lot more time than, maybe another student didn't, which would be of more or less the same quality. So again, what we saw throughout, 120 students was a range of, comfort with the VR, comfort with the technology, and also with their own expectations of their final project. So it also depended on the group and how much time they wanted to work on it versus how much time they needed to work on it. So.
Yeah, because you showed the pictures that you bring the headsets inside the classroom. So my understanding was all of the sessions are like that you bring the VR inside the classroom, and then the students do,
so
right?
It depends on the course and the term. So last year in Chem 3051, we brought the headsets into the classroom for an introductory orientation to get them used to the headsets with us there to help them. like how to put the headset on, how to use the controllers, set up their Nanom accounts. They play the First Steps game that comes with the headsets to get them oriented with the controllers. Chem 1500, which I did not have the time to talk about, that was all done in classroom. We had a very small class size that year. But for the actual modules, the students are working at the Scott Library for that. So these pictures were just taken at various times and at various sort of events. And that's why, you know, what I said about doing self-paced exercises doesn't seem to correspond with in-class work, but there was an in-class component, which was an orientation activity.
Okay, so great. So there is another questions from the participants. So it says, what if students wish to learn outside of the class and take the headsets at home? How do you see VR being accessible for students?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, I can say a couple of words about this. So right now, we do not really lend our headsets out to students to take home. But we did notice that, especially last year, there were a couple of students who actually had their own devices, and they did not even use any of the devices that we provided at the library or in the classroom. They just worked from home, doing these exercises using their own devices. So we expect that in the coming years, the proportion of those students who actually have their own headsets will go up quite a bit, okay? So I guess to directly answer your questions, right now, we do not offer the students to take our devices from our facilities home. So if they absolutely would like to work at home, if that's their preference, then they would need their own device, or they can borrow a device from, let's say, Scott Library, which has a few devices on, you know, that are on loan.
Exactly. Scott Library has a few Quest 2s of that they own themselves, and they do loan those out. So I would be fine if a student wanted to do that. They would have to install Nanom, and we would have to provide them with the recording files, but in theory, it could be done. I don't think we had any students that really pushed us for that, though. We had a few students who had their own devices, and I just gave them the files, and it worked out fine. I don't think we had any students out of 120 that refused to go to the library and demanded to take them home. So, you know, that was fine with me.
Okay, so another question is, how does enrollment into these VR courses going on? Are students enrolled in these courses based on first come, first serve basis?
So I can probably take that particular question. So this course, Chem 3051, this is a course that's been around for a long time, although we've started to incorporate some VR activities into it. As far as enrollment goes, we go with the same model that we have, you know, pretty much for every year, in that this particular course is open to students in biology, biochemistry, and chemistry majors for the most part. We enforce the prerequisites are like second year biochemistry, organic chemistry, and so forth. So, you know, if a student, say in, you know, theater or whatever, says, oh, I want to do VR, well, you know, they're not going to be able to enroll in this course because this is a third year level biochemistry course. There's just no getting around it. So we have prerequisites, and the course is, the vast majority of attendance is biology, biochem, and chem. Aside from that, we don't have any other sort of restrictions on the course, and we're able to accommodate everyone who kind of needs to take the course, if you will. We are, as I mentioned, we've created a new course, Chem 4055, and that course will have a lower enrollment, probably around 50 students, maybe a little bit higher, so that every student has a headset every single class. And for that, we're definitely going to have this course, 3051, as a prerequisite. And again, it will be limited to students in probably just chemistry and biochemistry, but that's basically how we case our courses in our department for most courses anyway. So the fact that these courses have a VR component doesn't really change how we handle enrollments.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we are now, the time is beyond 1 p.m. So I just would like to ask the final question, which is about the challenges. So, I mean, it takes time for the technology to be there, as you said, Dr. Drake. And can you briefly mention, you said about the continuous usage of the students. So I didn't get your point. How do you give students sometimes, are you giving the students sometime in the class to get used to VR glasses? Or in the last slide, you said about something, continuous usage of, yeah.
Yes, sure. So what I was mostly referring to in that particular slide was to make sure that however you introduce VR into a course, don't do it all at once, spread it out throughout the semester. So in our third year model, we have an orientation session, which is in person, which is instructor or TA led. We offer tons of time slots, so it's not a problem. And that's about an hour long. And we give the students a headset and we have them run a program which comes with all quests called First Steps, which is like a little mini game. It's a series of mini games to teach them how to use the controllers, how to put the headset on properly, set up the Guardian. So we do all that with them sort of there in the room. And then we have them set up their Nanome accounts. They load Nanome for the first time and they run in the Nanome tutorial with our sort of supervision. So they're with us there for the first part. So then after that, the focus switches to the Scott library and they have, 3, let's say, of these modules to complete by the end of the semester. So now we're expecting them to be a bit more independent. So we do tell the students that it's unlikely that they're going to do anything to permanently damage the headsets while they're working in the software. We tell them, and this is quite true, that these headsets are kind of like a cell phone where you can probably just figure out how to load a program if maybe you forget from the orientation or whatever. We've set up the headsets and the software to be as intuitive and as clear as possible. We provide some documents on eClass, reminders of how to get things set up. We also tailor the modules to be more, I guess you could say, rigorous, using more tools as the sessions go on. So like the first module is designed to be very simple, where they don't have to do a lot of manipulations with tools and so forth. But as we get closer to the end of the semester, we start showing them how to use the more advanced functions of the program. And we do that in the recordings. So we actually, in the recordings that they watch of our avatars, we would say, okay, you haven't learned how to use this tool. So what I want you to do now is hold down the B button and you should see this appear, whatever. Then you want to click on this. Okay, try it now. If you can't get it, rewind and try it again. So that's what I kind of meant, where they come in throughout the semester and each time they come in, they do a little bit more. They learn a new feature as they're doing the module. And then when it comes time for them to do the capstone, hopefully they'll have enough and there'll be at least one person in the group that's really ambitious and kind of is very comfortable with the system that they can produce a good recording for us. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Any final remarks, Dr. Derek and Kyle, before announcing the end of session?
Well, I would just say once again, thanks for hosting us. It's as you can probably see, this is a lot of work to sort of put together these VR activities, but we're very glad that it worked out. The students are enjoying it, and it's good to see other faculties and using VR for their purposes. And we're happy to talk about our project, and we're just glad that you were willing to host us today. So, anything else, Kyle?
Yeah, just thank you very much for inviting us to kind of present a little bit about our work. I think that I know in Lausanne School of Engineering, there is a lot of interest in VR technology and its use in the classroom. So we are very much looking forward to possible collaborations in the years to come. And we're very happy to hear that you have some funding to purchase some headsets for your projects. So I think that this is a very beginning stage of something very exciting here at York, especially between the two faculties, Lausanne and Faculty of Science. And we look forward to the years to come.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. It was so exciting. I learned a lot. I hope that the participants, the attendees also learned. So yeah, so I would like to let Francesco announce the next possible session. Do we have, Francesco, the next session available?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So I would also just like to quickly thank Dr. Derek Jackson and Dr. Kyle Belozerov for taking the time to be here today and for that great presentation. It's very informative and very interesting to see the work that you are doing in your classrooms and how you're using the technology to improve student outcomes. And also I would like to thank Dr. Ahmad Mohammadi for helping with this series, for helping throughout the entire series and for moderating the session again today. And thank you, of course, to all of our audience members for taking the time to participate and be here and ask questions. We always value your input and your questions at these sessions. And so I will just quickly share my screen to show the next session that we have coming up. As you all might already know, this is a monthly seminar series. So it is the fourth Friday of every month. So the next session that is coming up will be session 7 on Friday, September the 22nd, with the speaker being Mohammed Sajjad Ansar, who is a PhD candidate at TMU, or Toronto Metropolitan University, who will be speaking on the topic of driving in the futuristic traffic environments, exploring digital twins and virtual reality for analyzing road users' behavior. So if that is a session that you are all interested in, please mark that down on your calendar and share the registration link to anyone in your network that might be interested in this session as well, as registration is always open and free until the very last session. And as always, you will be getting email reminders for each session as they come up as well. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and just thank you again to everybody for being here today. It was a great session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.